Okay, so tonight we're going to be doing Parashat Bamidbar. Some very valuable lessons to be learned from the Parashat. And it's not a coincidence that this Parashat is read right around the time that we celebrate Chag HaShavuot, the holiday when we receive the Torah. And I'll be speaking a little bit about the connection between the two. For those of you who learned a little bit of American history, you probably already have an idea of how many presidents there were in this country. If you do not know, President Trump is number 45. And they were all very, very different. And believe it or not, each one of them was criticized. They all had their strengths and their weaknesses. They all had different personalities. But people always complain, and especially about the president today, since we hear about him more than the rest of them, that perhaps he's not as qualified, he's not a politician, he's a businessman, he's not as tactful as he should be. For that particular position, we all know that certain qualities are definitely necessary in order to succeed, not only as a leader, as a president, but also as an individual, as a human being. To be able to get along with everyone is very, very difficult. That's not necessarily part of his job. But a leadership position does require certain characteristics. There's no doubt about it. The problem is that people don't always realize that there's not one human being in this world that has all the strengths and no weaknesses. We all have certain abilities. We all lack other abilities. And as they say in the Yiddish language, Alts in einem ist nicht du bei keinem. All the good qualities in one individual you will find in none. No one has all the good qualities. And you have to live with whatever it is that you have. However, every human being should know that even though he has certain predispositions and certain weaknesses, it doesn't mean that he has to remain that way. Judaism puts a tremendous emphasis on refining one's character. Tikkun hamidot, as it is called. That is a task which we are entrusted with for the rest of our life. It's not something that you graduate from. We're continuously doing our best, hopefully, making efforts to refine our character. So here we're not even talking about enriching our knowledge of the Torah, which is of course something that we must do as well throughout our life and learn as much as we can. But everyone with his abilities, everyone depending on how much time he has. So not everyone will turn out to be the same, no matter how much he applies himself. But working on one's midot, as the rabbis call it, is something that applies to everyone. Men and women need to realize that this is part of our job in our life. So yes, there are certain weaknesses that human beings have, and presidents will have those weaknesses as well. But it's not realistic. It's not realistic to expect that someone will become a president with all the qualities that we would love him to have. He is what he is. However, it's important to realize that the fact that Hashem made us in a certain way, with certain characteristics, means that each one of us is destined for some other job. Each one of us has a mission in this world. Each one is unique in some way. And as the rabbis tell us, Bimkomcha yoshivucha ubishimcha yikraucha. They will place you from above where you belong, and they will call you by the name you deserve to be called. What that means is that everyone will be directed to where he needs to be, to the job where he belongs, and he will be called by the name that he deserves to be called. In other words, Hashem equips us with certain abilities, certain talents, and makes us a shidduch of sorts. In other words, he teams us up with the right people, hopefully, in the right place, at the right time. And that is where we belong. Everyone has a unique job. And what I can do, others cannot do as well. What others can do very well, I cannot do. And we need to recognize that. It's a very important idea that is found in this week's parasha as well, where we see that the tribes, there's 12 tribes, each one was assigned a different position around the Mishkan, around the tabernacle. Each one with his own flag. Each one with his own mission. especially the Leviim, the Levites who were in charge of the Avodat HaKodesh, of the holy work, of dealing with the Mishkan itself, whether it was assembling it or disassembling, or whether it was the service in the Mishkan itself. Even the tribe of Levi, which was assigned with that very important job, had different functions. And what was important over here is that they realized that they are all hopefully together, united in achieving the same goal. And what is that goal? The service of Hashem. Each one coming from perhaps a different direction, each one doing it slightly differently, but they're all united for the same purpose. If people are not united for the same purpose, then that is a recipe for disaster. And unfortunately, you know that in every job, in every profession, all over the world, there is this problem of politics, you can call it divisiveness, jealousy, where people do not get along for all kinds of reasons. And that could mean that the company or the nation will not last too long if there's too much of that divisiveness. When people are united, when a couple is united, and they want to achieve the exact same thing, they have a better chance of success. So here we see that despite the fact that we're all different, and everyone has some unique capabilities, it's about working together. And that is what we find in the 12 tribes surrounding the Mishkan. Wherever they would go, and wherever they would be, they would all keep to that same position in recognizing the fact that each one belongs in a certain place. They once asked the Chafetz Chaim of blessed memory, Rabbi, why are there so many versions in the prayers, so many customs? You know, the various communities, there's Sephardic, there's Ashkenazi, there's Bukhari, there's Yemenite, there's even Italians. You know, why have so many customs? Can't we just unite them all and have them all pray the exact same way? Even though part of the answer lies in the fact that we are in the diaspora, we've been scattered all over the world, and as a result of the diaspora, we have, I guess, adopted different traditions. We all have the same Torah, but we have different customs. People dress differently, they speak differently, and there's different mentalities. But the rabbi answered the question as follows. Try to speak with the Russian general and tell him, General, I have an idea. Instead of having your tanks and your foot soldiers and your infantry, your air force, all over the place, why don't you just make one army, unite them all, bring them all together, and have one powerful force? Why split them into different areas, different types of forces? Who needs all of that? And what will the general tell you? Each one is important. Each one does a job slightly differently. Each one works from a different direction. What they all have in common is they all want to win the war. They all want to defeat the enemy. Just each one does it in a different way. They're all important and they're all necessary. So it's not a matter of joining everyone and making everyone exactly the same, because each one contributes something different. Each one does his job in a different way. But as long as we have a common goal, and that is to defeat the enemy, and who is the enemy here? The evil inclination. We want to win the war. We want to succeed in life. We want to do the will of Hashem. That's the common goal. As long as that's the common goal, even though you may be doing it slightly differently, you may be pronouncing the words slightly differently, you have perhaps different customs, we all have the same Shema Yisrael. We all believe in the same God. We all follow the same halacha, approximately, with a few exceptions. We all have the same goal. And that's what makes us win the war. It's not just about doing everything exactly the same thing. We have to appreciate the differences in people, how each one contributes. Life is about challenges, many, many challenges, and that is what you will notice in this parasha, as well as in other parashiot, that the Jews are being described as soldiers, being counted as soldiers. Why soldiers? What war are we talking about? We're not necessarily talking about a particular war yet, but they are foot soldiers. After all, there's a battle to fight. In order to win the war, in order to succeed in life, we have to look at it as a battle, as a challenge. It's not a picnic. There's a lot of difficulties, a lot of challenges that lie ahead, and every one of us has those issues, those difficulties in his or her life. No one can say everything is smooth sailing, nothing to worry about, no difficulties whatsoever. Even if you mind your own business and you do everything right, you'll be surprised. There's all kinds of things that can come your way, and how do you deal with them? So we must recognize that life is about a challenge, and that we need to be equipped, properly equipped, if we want to deal with these challenges properly. So, how do we succeed in the battle? Well, we have to take life seriously. In order to take life seriously, we have to care. שיהיה אכפת לנו. How do we know that to care is important? We need to care about it. We see from this week's parasha and from other portions of the Torah that Hashem wants to count us. Did you notice it? From time to time you see how Hashem wants to count the Jewish people. Don't you know? Hashem knows how many there are. No, He asks us to count, to remind us that every one of us is important. He cares about us. And that is His way of telling us, I care about you, and I want you to care about me. So His care is by counting. That's how He demonstrates His care. He counts every single one, and He wants us to care about Him. I remember how people are very excited when they find gold, whether it is the people that go under water in the seas and find sunken treasure, or whether it's archaeologists, or whether it's people who were digging in their yard and they found a whole treasure trove of gold coins. They're all excited and they start counting those coins. This is what's important to them. To some people, that's all that matters in life. That's what they care about. They care about material things. Money, coins, gold coins. And they're like little children. Look how much we found. Millions of dollars worth of sunken treasure. And then they have to fight it out in the courts. Who does it belong to? To the original owners of the boat, to the insurance who covered the boat, to the one who found it. But that's what they care about. And here Hashem is telling us in the Torah, I care about you. I care about human beings. This is what I count. This is what matters to me. And that's a very important lesson. But why is it so important to care about something? Very simple. If we don't care enough, there's always the danger that people who know that this is important, they know it's important, may become lazy. Laziness, believe it or not, is definitely something that slows down a lot of people. Even though they know that this is the truth, even though they know something is important, but they're lazy about it. If you care about something, you know it's important, but you also really care about it, you won't be so lazy. And in life, people who are lazy have proven not to be lazy when things really are important to them. They need to catch that flight, for example. They don't want to miss it. Oh, for that you're not lazy. You put your alarm clock several hours before because it's important to you. You care about it. So we see to care is something that can help a lot to make sure at least we're not lazy about it. When it comes to spirituality, a lot of people are lazy. Physical acquisitions, to buy something, to be the first one in the store, to get it because it's on sale, for that, they're not lazy. It turns out somehow, for some reason, that for spirituality, for mitzvot, for good deeds, people tend to be a little lazy. What's necessary, therefore, is not only to care about it, of course, is to remember that life is serious and that we need to assume responsibilities. Whoever is a Jew must realize that he has a very important responsibility. He just cannot say, well, let somebody else do it. No, each one is being commanded, each one is being instructed to do the mitzvah, because you cannot depend on others, you cannot assume somebody else will do it. Each one has an obligation to do it. So what's required is assumption of responsibility, and that is insinuated in the word lemasa in the Torah. Lemasa means to carry the load. Yes, to observe the mitzvot is to carry the load. We need to be prepared for that. But people who are lazy, people who do not care, of course, are going to have a very hard time with it, and are always going to complain how it's difficult and why me. Be happy that you were chosen for this great opportunity to serve Hashem. It's a privilege, and it's also a responsibility. All right, so the first thing we realize is that we are servants of Hashem, just like the Malachim, just like the angels are. A Jew is reminded constantly that in the same way that Hashem has servants in heaven, He has servants here. He wants to have servants here. And that is what we represent, Hashem's servants. Now, in what way are we different than the rest of the world? All human beings really are servants of Hashem. They're all special to Him. He cares about everyone. But we have different missions. As I said earlier, every human being has a unique job for which he was created. Each one is necessary. Hashem wants every one of us. But there's a difference. We were given 613 commandments and they were given 7. 613 commandments because our job deals with the spiritual aspect of life, whereas the rest of the world, their job deals with the physical aspect of life. And I'm going to come back to that soon. We need to make that differentiation. There's no discrimination here. There's no feeling better or in any way different. We're all the same. We're all human beings. We're all physical human beings. We all have a soul. But we have different jobs. And when an individual is pulled in a certain direction to do something, whether it is to be a plumber, a carpenter, a teacher, an architect, or a president, that's all from Shamayim. It's all orchestrated in a way that presents itself in something called mazal. The mazal, or the destiny of the human being, is what pretty much directs, like a GPS, the individual to do what he needs to do. People, of course, sometimes are unhappy with what they're doing. People change jobs. Yes, all of this can happen too because we are capable of doing more than one thing. It's not just one particular job, but it's certain types of functions and jobs that each one has capabilities or talents that will enable him to succeed in that job. You still have to apply yourself. You still cannot be lazy about it. You have to be serious. Otherwise, a person can be very, very qualified and capable and not do it because he's lazy. He'd rather sit at home and watch TV. There's a lot of people like that who choose to be unemployed. They don't want to work. So you see, even though they can apply themselves, they don't want to. So that's a problem. That takes us back to what we said earlier. Be careful with laziness. But if one does not appreciate what he's doing, does not know how special he is to Hashem, how Hashem wants him to be productive, obviously he's going to ignore it. And the more lazy he is by nature, the more difficulties he will have. All right, so now that we know that each human being is special and contributes in some way, what else do we need in order to succeed in our job? We need knowledge. As Francis Bacon said in Latin, "Namet ipsa scientia potesta est." Knowledge is power. Knowledge is something that endows the human being with power, great powers. If he applies that knowledge in a good way. In a bad way, you can make an atomic bomb, and it can be very, very destructive. But knowledge endows the human being with tremendous power. The Jew has a greater need for this knowledge because he needs to know how to observe the Torah and mitzvot. 613 commandments. So, on a very basic level, knowledge is important for the Jew in order for him to know what to do. How to observe Shabbat properly requires tremendous amount of knowledge of halachot, of the laws of Shabbat. So on a basic level, knowledge for the Jew is important so that he should know how to observe the Torah, which he was commanded with. But I want to focus a little bit more on the additional areas where knowledge comes into play, where it's very important, and that applies to everyone. There was this Russian woman who called me up. She was involved in a very major car accident. She was injured very badly. She was in the hospital for a while, recovering. Baruch Hashem, she recovered. But in that state of being in the hospital and going through a lot of pain, she asked me, "Rabbi, I know God is kind. I read that. Where is His kindness here?" How do you explain that Hashem is kind if a person has to go through all this kind of pain and suffering? Where is His kindness? Now, obviously, that's not something that we can answer in 5 minutes. But that question does bring up a very important idea. And that is that in order to understand just a little bit of what goes on in life, not just in that situation, one has to have a little bit of that knowledge. Because with the knowledge, we will be able to understand a little bit more than without the knowledge. Let's just say, it's not possible for us to know everything, and definitely not God's ways. But with a little bit of knowledge, we would know more than without it. The best way to explain this is, I like to give the following example. Imagine you're traveling to Mongolia. In Mongolia, they speak Mongolian, which is, by the way, not similar to just about any other language in that area. And you buy yourself a book with the basic sentences and expressions in Mongolian. How to say good morning, how to say thank you, how to say please, how to count, how to ask for directions. And they have these kinds of books in many, many languages. And you feel good, you feel proud of yourself, you review it, and you're all ready to go to Mongolia to communicate on a basic level. I can guarantee you that all you will be able to do is just maybe get by asking for the basics. With that booklet, it is impossible that one will be able to know everything there is to know about Mongolian culture, about Mongolian life. One needs to study a lot more, perhaps even live there, to enrich his vocabulary with more words, right? More expressions, more knowledge, in order that he should understand what's going on, what these people are all about, how they think, how they conduct themselves, and so forth. So the same is true with the Torah, and the same is with the ways of Hashem. Here we're saying that life is about challenges, about all kinds of ups and downs that we will face. How will we deal with them? What is the correct way to deal with all kinds of things that happen in life? How does a man deal with a difficult woman? How does a father or mother deal with a difficult child? These are just some examples I can think of that everyone may face. If it's not your own, then it's your neighbor or your friend or your relative. Can you help them with those kind of problems? You think professionals can help them? Not necessarily. It depends on how much knowledge they have, how familiar they are with that particular problem. So the knowledge of the Torah is extremely helpful for us to understand a little bit what's going on in life, what Hashem expects of us. So it's not just for the halachot. Yes, we need to know how to observe the commandments. That's very important. Without it, how are you going to observe the commandments? But also, in order to get a little bit of an idea of what is pain and suffering, and I have a lecture about it. What is the meaning of pain and suffering in life? People go through all kinds of situations. I'm not even talking about illness right now. I'm talking about just all kinds of issues that happen that is beyond our control. Someone sues you, and you didn't do anything to him. What does it mean? Why do you have to hire an attorney right now and spend money to go to court? Or what about those that were accused and landed in jail for not, something that they don't deserve, or at least they think they don't deserve? How are we supposed to deal with that? What should our attitude be? Some people will start complaining to God. Where is your kindness? Where are you? Why are you letting this happen? I'm such a good person, and so forth. So you understand the importance of this knowledge called Torah for a Jew is very important, because it will help him realize a little bit what is going on. From the beginning of creation, however, we learn another reason of why knowledge is important. I began to say that part of our mission in life is to rectify our midot, to refine our character. How do we know that? Well, whoever told us that? You will not find anywhere in the Torah that the Torah commands us, don't be angry, don't be lazy, don't be stingy. You don't find commandments about midot, about character. You will find commandments about being charitable and being kind and so forth, but not about the character. So how do we know that it's important for us to rectify our midot. Rabbis tell us, Derech Eretz kadma laTorah. That's all they tell us. Remember that proper conduct comes even before learning of the Torah, which means that obviously the Torah is not given to animals. It must be that we're dealing with people who already are decent human beings. Otherwise, if we're not dealing with decent human beings of fine character, how are they going to ever learn the Torah? So it's an assumption. The Torah makes, in a way, an assumption that the foundation is already there. That people already understand the value of working on one's character. So what do we learn that from? From the beginning of creation. In the beginning of creation, we see that every human being is given a job. And the Torah does not exactly specify what those jobs are. It just says that you're put into this world to watch over it, to protect it, to take good care of it, not to destroy it. What do we see? If we look around, we will see that even the fruit that we need to survive needs preparation. It needs its own tikkun. So we're using the word tikkun, which means to repair, to rectify, to prepare, or to in this case, to cook. If you want to eat it, you have to do something to that food. You don't just eat the wheat. You grind it, right? After you've harvested, you've threshed it, you winnow it, you grind it, you make a dough, you bake it. Look what goes into making one loaf of bread. All this work in making a tikkun for that chita, for that wheat or barley or whatever it may be. So here we see that man is placed on earth to do some tikkun. He has to make a tikkun to the food he eats. And if it's not to cook, then it's to remove the peel. Some things don't need to be cooked, but you need to remove the peel. So some preparation is involved, and that preparation is called a tikkun, a form of tikkun for the food we eat. A Jew, however, is given also the mitzvah of brit milah, circumcision, the male. What's that all about? He has to remove that extra piece that's there, the foreskin. Why did Hashem create him with something extra? Let him be born without that foreskin, without the orla. So in the Kabbalah, they explain that in itself is a reminder of, here, this is part of your job. You need to correct yourself. You need to refine your character. You need to remove that which is no good. There's something that's left for you to do. Hashem did everything else, but he left something for you to do, and that is work on yourself. So the human being is born with a raw nature. Everyone has a raw nature. And it's up to him throughout his life to refine that. And everyone has that ability. But obviously, if he does not have the knowledge or the will, or he's, just not interested, then obviously he's not going to go about it. People become very, very busy with making a living, and they have other priorities, and they don't realize that this is the most important priority, because this will determine the type of life we will have. I always explain that when we head upstairs and they will ask us questions, why did you do this? And they will show us a video of it too. What's the purpose of it? They know everything anyway. Why do they have to point it out to us in a video and ask us about it? What's the whole purpose of this interview? So part of the idea of showing us a video of our life, and by the way, people who have had near-death experiences have also experienced something similar, where they see a video of their entire life and they feel bad about certain scenes. And feeling bad about those frames in their life is part of the shame and the pain that the soul goes through upstairs. It needs to go through it. But when they point to a certain scene and they tell us, look, how you yelled at someone, how you cursed. Had you learned Torah, you would not have come to that. You want to know why it was important for you to learn Torah? You know why it was important for you to be more knowledgeable? Because you would have avoided this fight. You would have minimized it. You would have just ignored it, but you chose not to ignore it. You chose to fight and to do something about it. And you were even physical, God forbid. What for? Because you were not knowledgeable enough to realize that these things are silly. There's so many trivialities that people make of it a big deal. And when they head upstairs, they see this ruined their life. They would have stayed together with their spouse had they not made those silly mistakes over and over again. Silly mistakes usually about the family. Oh, why didn't you invite her, and why didn't you invite him, and she's upset at you and he's upset at you. All kinds of silly things. You know what I'm talking about, that people fight about all the time. Couples, not major issues. Usually minor issues they make a fuss about. So the more knowledgeable a person is, the more mature he is, the easier it will be for him. It's not a guarantee, but the easier it will be for him to handle all of these things. So the circumcision reminds the Jew, you're not perfect. You're born with something to be removed. That means that you should always realize that throughout your life, there's something that is up to you, is left for you to rectify, to improve. So as we said earlier, the non-Jewish world has a lot to improve in the physical world, and the Jew is given the job of rectifying that which is spiritual. By rectifying the spiritual, we're able to elevate this world to a very high level. And of course, if we would have done that, then the world would have been a completely different type of place. When Mashiach comes, that's what he does. He rectifies, he repairs the world and brings it to the original blueprint of what this world should have been like. A world where everyone is aware of, where everyone is cognizant of the presence of Hashem, and that's all they have in mind, and that's all they desire, is to serve Him. So that is something that we have to wait for till Mashiach comes. But in the meantime, those of us who understand the importance of this, we have to continuously make efforts to make sure that we stay on the right path and we don't become distracted. So, what's the connection between this parasha and Chag HaShavuot? Why are they close? Because this week's parasha is called Bamidbar, in the desert. And the rabbis tell us that the human being is like a desert. He's barren if he's unrefined. Once he learns Torah, that desert can bloom. That desert can become a beautiful place. A desert is barren, but it can become a beautiful place when you irrigate it with water. The Torah is compared to water, the Torah is compared to rain. So when you do it right, you can cultivate this land, you can perfect the place, you can perfect yourself, in other words, with the knowledge of the Torah. So what is all that called? Avodah lamidot. That's called working on one's character. And you should know it's a big job. There's a lot of good books that help people who want to do that and work on different characteristics. And I have a whole series about the midot, 39, I believe, lectures on advice, how to deal with all kinds of weaknesses that people may have. And of course, if there's no desire and interest, then it's never going to start. But people who really want to must realize that it is possible. It is possible with Hashem's help to progress a lot in this area called working on one's midot. So how does a Jew go about working on his midot? Through the study of the Torah. That's part of the way that he's able to conquer or control his evil inclination. And that is the meaning of the pasuk we say in Tehillim, Edut Hashem ne'emana mahkimat pesi. The testimony of Hashem is faithful, making the simple one wise. He's a simple person. He's not knowledgeable, but the Torah, the testimony of Hashem, in other words, this knowledge base of the Torah, can transform even the simple one into a wise person. If he does not learn the Torah, then he will remain barren. He will remain like a desert. But now we've come to a big question. There's a lot of people who are very knowledgeable in Torah. They've studied a lot of Torah, and they're not successful. They're very abusive as a spouse. They don't get along with people. They have issues, even though they've learned Torah. And a lot of people have asked me about it, how come this rabbi is conducting himself in such a way that is not befitting, not becoming to him? How could it be? Isn't he a rabbi? Isn't he knowledgeable? My first reaction is, whoever told you that rabbis are angels? They're human beings, just like anyone else. They're just more knowledgeable. Perhaps they have a title. Perhaps they have an experience. But that doesn't guarantee that they're the best of people. They can be thieves, God forbid. They can be crooks. They can cheat. They can lie. Some people are shocked. And obviously it's a terrible disgrace and a scandal when somebody like that is caught. You wouldn't expect it. Of course, we expect people who are more knowledgeable to be better. But this comes as a reminder. This serves as a reminder that human beings are fragile, they can fail, and it can happen to the best. So that's why there are certain safeguards that people have to be careful with, so that they don't stumble and do things that are terribly wrong, because a human being cannot assume that just because he's good today, he'll be good tomorrow, just because he's very knowledgeable and he's righteous, that he won't be able to be corrupted. The best of people have been bribed. If the amount is large enough, you may be able to bribe almost anyone. Even though this gentleman is a judge, and he was a good judge, but if he needs the money and you come up with a large amount of money, he may fall for it. So it shouldn't come as a surprise. It is shocking, it is very, very sad and disappointing to see good people who were once upon a time good people fail, but it can happen. That is what teshuvah is all about. The Torah allows a human being, any human being, to make a U-turn. Just start all over. Ask Hashem to forgive you. There's obviously differences between the teshuvah for a serious sin and for a lesser sin, and we're not going to get into that right now. But teshuvah is something that is possible. One should not give up hope in thinking just because he made a mistake, that's it. Mistakes happen, and they can happen to anyone. But without Torah, what's the excuse? Imagine telling the policeman after breaking the law, "Oh, Your Honor, officer, I didn't know." Ignorance of the law is no excuse. That's what he will tell you. So you cannot come upstairs and say, "I didn't know." You didn't know because you didn't learn. You should have learned. So we see from all of this is that if one learns, at the very least, he's more equipped, he's better equipped to handle all kinds of things that happen in life. He still has free will. He can still decide to do the right thing or the wrong thing, but at least he has the knowledge, and the knowledge will help him. So why doesn't everybody succeed with just having the knowledge of the Torah? Rabbis remind us of a very important point, that this learning of Torah is holy, it's divine, but depending on how one learns it, it can turn out to be Sam Chaim or Sam Hamavet. That same Torah for two individuals. For one, it will be a potion of life. It will give him life. It will show him the right path to follow in life. It will improve his life. It's a Sam Chaim. It will enliven him. It will bring him happiness and blessing, a potion of life. And for another one, it can turn out to be Sam Hamavet, a potion of death. It will destroy him. It will ruin his life, ruin him as a person. How could that be? Just imagine someone who, because he's very knowledgeable, becomes arrogant as a result. And as an arrogant person, he steps on others. He makes fun of others. He embarrasses others in public because of that arrogance, because of that knowledge. So that knowledge is being misused. But how could it be? It's the same Torah. Something is missing over here. You follow me? For one, it's a potion of life. It does something very, very good for him. And for another person, not right away, but with time, it could really cause him to get carried away. It could also happen that at one point he was a good person, but later on he became a criminal or he became a sinner. So it could be even initially he started doing the right thing. Eventually he stopped. So something is missing over here. A lot of people forget about that, but that's called Yirat Shamayim. Yirat Shamayim is the fear of heaven. It all depends if a Jew really begins with the right attitude. Why am I learning Torah? Because Hashem said so. I have the basic, bare minimum fear of heaven, or Chas v'shalom, God forbid, none. It does not exist. Is there any fear of heaven whatsoever? This can make a big difference. If a person does not have the fear of heaven, then he can, God forbid, use that knowledge in the wrong way. Take advantage of people, to mistreat people. Yirat Shamayim will make a big difference. But how do you acquire Yirat Shamayim? How do you acquire the fear of heaven? So the rabbis tell us, in order for a Jew to develop that fear of heaven, there has to be the basic level of humbleness. I say basic level because there's a high level of humbleness, which one has to work on a lot to reach that level. He has to go through other levels of refinement of character until he reaches that level of humbleness. But a very low level of humbleness exists and is necessary in order to develop Yirat Shamayim. And I'll tell you why that humbleness is necessary. A low level of humbleness will enable the Jew to accept instructions, to be respectful of teachers, of the rabbis, of the chachamim. Without the basic humbleness of being willing to accept instruction from others, one may actually think he's smarter, he knows better, I don't want to listen to him, I don't agree with him. All right, maybe you don't agree, but go to someone else, or perhaps look it over. If there's no humbleness where a person realizes, I may not know everything, somebody else may know a lot more. You see what I mean? Without this basic humbleness, the Yirat Shamayim cannot develop at all. And I'll explain soon what that basic humbleness is all about. Basic humbleness reminds the Jew that it is impossible for us to know everything there is. We don't have the answers to all the questions. It enables him to accept what others tell him, to hear rebuke. He may be wrong, he may be doing something wrong. If he doesn't have that basic humbleness, he won't be able to go to the Yirat Shamayim. It's impossible. Yirat Shamayim is obviously something that we can understand if we have basic emunah. But faith in God and to fear God are two separate things. A lot of people believe God created the world, but they don't fear Him. If they would fear Him, they wouldn't do anything that's against Him. And there's different levels of Yirat Shamayim too. So it is not possible to develop enough Yirat Shamayim if you don't have the basic humbleness. And this is lacking. A lot of people do not have enough humbleness for that. And that is what the rabbis tell us, that if you don't have Yirat Shamayim, all you have is Torah. It's compared to an individual who was given the keys to the house, but he was not given the keys to the gate. How is he going to get into the house? He first has to go through the gate. The gate is the Yirat Shamayim. You can't get to the house, you can't get to the inside, to the Torah, without first opening the gate of Yirat Shamayim, the fear of heaven. That is why Yirat Shamayim is really an introduction. Do you really care about this? Are you serious about this? Do you understand what it means that Hashem is watching over you, that everything that you do is you're responsible for? That all of that is Yirat Shamayim. So without the basic humbleness, basic anava, it's not going to easily happen. And that is why you do find people who may have at one time had Yirat Shamayim, may have once been doing the right thing, but they went off the derech, they went off the path, unfortunately. And this can happen in any generation. It happened a lot in the past where people went against what was established and created all kinds of movements and had their own way of thinking, which was contrary to the Torah. And you ask yourself, wait a minute, where did they come up with this idea? This goes against everything that the Gemara speaks about. And what did they say? Well, this is all man-made. In order for them to look down at what was already established, they have to cheapen it. They have to look down on it. Otherwise, how dare they go against that which is divine? Well, who said it's divine? And that was the message, one of the messages of last week's Parashat Bechukotai. Parashat Bechukotai, we learn that it's not enough to learn Torah. צריך להיות עמל בתורה. עמל בתורה means to toil in the Torah, to work hard. To work hard in the Torah means not to give in, not to compromise, not to miss a day without learning Torah. And the question is, why is that so important to toil? Why not just learn? Learn. You'll become knowledgeable and you'll know what to do and how to observe. The rabbis tell us no. If you read through Parashat Bechukotai, you will see a gradual deterioration of one's attachment, of a Jew's attachment to the Torah. Whoever does not toil hard, the commentaries, the rabbis tell us, eventually he will stop observing a mitzvah. After he stops observing a mitzvah, he will detest others who observe the mitzvah. He will not like it that others do it. After that, he will hate the chachamim, the rabbis. After that, he will prevent others from doing the mitzvot. After that, he will deny the value of the mitzvah, the veracity of the mitzvah. And after that, he will be kofer beikar. He will deny God's existence altogether. Gradual. It doesn't happen overnight. If he was once religious, he stops being religious. You ask yourself, how? It happened slowly. And it started by the fact that he was not willing to work hard, to be uncompromising. He didn't take it seriously. He didn't care about it. And that is how it happens, that people, even though they started off on the right foot, they were God-fearing, eventually they lost it. They did not labor, and they did not review their learning, perhaps. So we talked about the importance of humbleness and how that is a necessity for one to be able to progress, but we have to be careful with false humbleness. I want to give you an example of false humbleness. There was once an argument in a synagogue. One guy began to yell at another and to fight with him because he wanted the aliyah. He wanted to be called to the Torah. And sometimes people get into a fight about it because, for whatever reason, they want the aliyah. The rabbi went over to the guy who was making a big fuss. I don't understand you. He says, I overhear you when you're praying, you're telling God, Anochi afar va'efer. I'm like dust and ash. I'm a nothing. You're so humble. Such a humble person like you, how could you fight and argue like that? He says, Rabbi, he says, I am humble. I am a nothing. I am like dust and like ash. But he's a zero. In other words, he's less. He's a zero. Rabbi says, no, that's not true humbleness. True humbleness is when you really feel you're nothing and somebody else is a something. But when you look at others in that way, when you consider others a zero, a nothing, then that's not humbleness. Person's humbleness, therefore, that the Torah wants is called submissiveness, hitbatlut. That we're submissive to the rabbis, that we hear what they have to say, that we accept their teaching, we follow their words, we realize that there are other people out there that may be more knowledgeable than us, that we're not perfect, and that other people may be better than us in some ways. That even though we find fault in someone, maybe that's his weakness, but he has a strength in some other area. This will help us look up to people instead of looking down to them. You see how all that humbleness is important? Just want to finish with a very important detail. As we're learning, as we said before, is like water. It irrigates the field, it irrigates us. But what happens when you put water on thorns? Weeds. That's what you're going to have growing in the fields, thorns and weeds. You don't want to water the thorns and weeds. You want to remove the thorns and the weeds. The Torah is compared to Geshem. We will see later on. It's compared to rain that comes down little by little, drop by drop. And in the beginning, when all that learning is being done, all that Torah, you may not see that it affects you in any positive way. But come back a year from now, and you will see what a beautiful field of flowers, and what a beautiful tapestry of all these flowers that have grown, that are fragrant and so beautiful and so pleasant to see. Come back after a while and you see the effects of the rain. All of a sudden, it's so green. You see it in the hills too, when you get so much rain. The effect of the Torah takes time. So don't be discouraged if you don't see the effects right away. Come back after a year in a yeshiva after a year of serious study, and you will see that the individual has been completely transformed for the better.